Hi, I'm Barb.
Hi, I'm Pat.
Pat and I have a lot of interesting conversations.
Yes, and we thought you might like to listen in to our podcast that we've called Coffee House Inspirations.
We hope you will enjoy our topics.
Good morning, Barb.
Good morning, Pat.
How's by you today?
I'm pretty good. I think we're going to get some rain today. It's looking a little cloudy and dark out there, and I think we might even get some thunderstorms.
Ooh, I love thunderstorms.
Me too.
They're somehow very soothing for some reason.
Yeah.
The last dog we had, when there was a thunderstorm, and she was always kind of a fearful, anxiety-ridden dog anyway, she would head straight upstairs to the bathtub and hide out in the bathtub upstairs.
Oh, really? Like inside the bathtub?
Well, but we kind of surmised that it must have filtered the noise for her somehow, or it was the closest she could get to something that looked like it might be a hole.
A cave. Oh, poor thing.
Yeah, so anyway, so today we're going to have a discussion which is a little bit tied into the discussion we had last week about the conscious and the subconscious mind and what that information kind of leads us to. But today we're going to talk about self-regulation, or more commonly known as inner discipline.
Okay.
And how that is so different with so many people, and also with one person who can have a great deal of discipline about one thing and then absolutely no discipline about something else. And so it's not that you can just say this one kind of person has this and this other kind of person has this. It's in all of us to have almost all of those things, correct?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Because I don't have any trouble with certain things, doing them just automatically, or just feel no resistance whatsoever, and then something else, it'll be like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm good at some things for the self-discipline, not a lot. I wouldn't call myself, I wouldn't describe myself as a real disciplined person, but I know that I can, because I have done it, but it doesn't come real natural for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, that's an interesting thing too, because I think, like, for myself, I noticed that my sort of ability to discipline myself in terms of actions and doing certain things and not doing other things also came with age. As I got older and had a more varied group of friends and more varied experiences, I could see other people doing things differently than I would do, and it didn't seem to be anything very magical, other than the fact that they didn't have that impulse to do the things that I was doing, or vice versa. And so I think part of it certainly comes from growth and maturity, don't you think?
Yes, I would totally agree with that. Yes. Mm-hmm.
But that mysterious part is something else, I think. And I've been really enjoying those discussions that we've been having on what are the roles of the conscious and the subconscious mind, and how deeply that impacts our actions and our belief systems in particular.
Mm-hmm.
That we could have a belief system about something that is constantly sabotaging our attempts to discipline ourselves to do one particular thing.
Yeah. Because I think that you're kind of maybe taught that at growing up. If you're given everything that you want in the moment, as opposed to either working for it or waiting or saving or whatever, that would for sure make a difference, I think.
Yes, I think that is for sure as well. And yet I also see and think there are situations where people didn't get what they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
When they got something, it was, how would I describe this? So you get something and you just didn't expect to get it. And so you don't think you'll ever get it again. So you get that kind of, that kind of a lack mentality, or this idea
Oh, right. Okay.
things won't come again. And so there's a tendency to overuse that one thing, or to quickly use that one thing, because you're now in a kind of a lack mentality, and you don't think you'll ever get it again.
Yeah,
And
that's a good point.
And that could come from, from early subconscious learning, where you as a kid, let's say you didn't get what you wanted.
Yeah.
Or you were openly denied things that you wanted, or you were punished for wanting things because,
Mm-hmm.
and so you build in this program that says, if I get that, I'm going to grab it and run with it.
Yeah. 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 I have a, yeah. Yeah. I have a good example of that, as a matter of fact. When I was about, maybe 13, I really wanted a guitar for Christmas. And so I really thought that I was getting one. I was excited about it. And what ended up happening was I got a toy one instead. Like it was a joke gift. And
Ouch.
it was it was supposed to be a joke, but it really hurt me, because I really wanted to learn how to play the guitar, and I really thought I was getting one. And I guess they just didn't believe that I could either stick with it or learn it. I don't know what the reasoning was, but I got a toy one in its place. And so I just kind of laughed it off, like, with everybody else. But it really hurt me that I didn't get one.
So what kind of messages would you have told yourself about that?
Probably that this is how I feel when looking back, that they didn't trust that I would stick with it, learn how to play it,
So in a way that you wouldn't deserve it.
that I wouldn't deserve it. Yeah.
Yeah. That would be a pretty strong message that would go to the subconscious mind, because
Mm-hmm.
there would be so much a feeling attached to it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
When we had talked about that last week in the podcast, we said that from all of the things that we have read and all of the research that is around this particular topic, if something goes into the subconscious that has a large emotional component, it's like it really goes in.
It does.
And it creates a kind of a track for further events that look like they could be the same. So you would almost build in a track that said, don't ask for what you want.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
You think that might have happened in a way? Can you think of other experiences where you had some resistance in asking for what you wanted?
Resistance for over my lifetime, I'm sure that there is. I'm thinking of another instance. I don't know if this pertains to that, but I had gotten, I was a real fan of the Monkees back in the day, and I got, I think they had 4 albums out at the time, and I got them all for Christmas.
You mean, hey, we're the Monkees?
Those are the ones.
Okay.
And one of them was really warped. I mean, it was so bad. I mean, you couldn't play it. And so my mom was going to replace it, of course. And I waited and waited and asked, and it never came. I never did get that album. So again,
So
that might have.
So it could have reinforced that same message.
Mm-hmm.
Because there would have been a lot of feeling attached to that, wouldn't there?
Again, yeah.
That you had really wanted this, that it was very important to you, and you outwardly asked for it.
Yeah.
And then the message goes back in, because there's a lot of disappointment, sadness, and some probably being angry. And you carry that emotional weight back into the interpretation that you have, which could be the same, right? Could it be something like, well, why wouldn't they give that to me? Or why would they give that to me? And how old were you?
Okay, at that point, I was younger than the guitar thing. So I'd say I was probably maybe about 11 or 12. So probably, because I remember the houses that we lived in. So the album was in one house and the guitar was in another house. So probably about maybe 2 years, 1 or 2 years apart for those two instances.
And those are pretty, pretty young years to be learning lessons like that, because you would really not have, and you not have that fully developed conscious mind where you could work it through rationally and say, well, it might have been this or might have been that, because you're still in that learning age where you're looking at the world to see what the world is going to be like for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think those are two really good examples, because when those beliefs enter the subconscious, we were talking about this last week, they become a program.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the next time you might be less inclined to ask for something, or the program might be running that if I ask for this, well, I'm not going to get it, but I'll ask it. That kind of.
I'm not asking without expectation of it actually coming to fruition.
Yes, I think, and I think those are a couple of really powerful examples, because when we're looking at areas like, like self-discipline or inner discipline or something where that could actually be part of the learning process, where you now have a program running that says you won't get. So when you come up with something that you want, you have developed a way of stopping from asking, as a kind of self-discipline, which is really not the most useful kind, because it comes out of some very negative programming.
Right.
And so
how about you? Can you think of anything that,
well,
you were denied?
Don't get me started. Well, I can remember, I grew up with a sister a year older than myself, and we were always kind of in the same range of what we wanted and were interested in. And I remember we decided that we should have bicycles, two-wheel bicycles, and our parents were very resistant and kind of thought we were too young or whatever. And so we waited and waited and waited and waited and waited.
Aww.
And you kind of have all this expectation, and you have all this excitement, and then you have this disappointment, and then you don't really understand why, and so you kind of make up your own. So yeah, I mean, I can think of situations like that for sure, where it changed my perception of what results you could get when you asked for something.
Did you ever get them?
Eventually we got them, and they were very enjoyable, but a lot of trauma had gone into it, and a lot of a lot of it seems strange to be talking about it like that, but a lot of trauma about the disappointment of it, and the sense of being powerless, like this decision was
right
totally out of our hands. I mean, as a kid, you don't always understand that, because you think that if you ask for something and it's deemed a reasonable ask, that somewhere along the line it will have, bear fruits. And so I think I did from that experience get a little bit of a wariness about asking for things, that there was somebody who would control the ask and the giving, and without any reasonable explanation. Because I think you can have a really good conversation with a young child that explains why they can't have something, and that and if it's logical and loving, it goes into their subconscious as a reasonable process, instead of just no, or I'm not talking about it, or shut up, or whatever. And so that the information that goes into the subconscious is totally different. And I think your understanding of delayed gratification comes into play as well.
I think that's a really, really good point, because I remember when I was younger, if you asked a question and you didn't get an answer and you asked why, because I said so. That was a common response, just because I said so. And that was it. But like you said, if it's explained, the reason why, that would make a huge difference.
Yes, and done with respect, that
Hmm.
and where you also have some empathy because you understand what it's like to want things,
Yeah.
and not shame people for it, where you say, I can, I can see that you really want that. And I want to explain to you why we can't do that right now. And I know
Yeah.
you're going to be disappointed. So you can acknowledge those feelings that children have and adults have them. You can acknowledge those feelings without creating any kind of residual trauma about it, because then if the feelings are at ease and not in that kind of trauma area, it doesn't bleed down into the subconscious as some kind of a deficit on your part.
Hmm.
There's not this other piece of you that is, not worthy of this, or, people
Yeah.
don't care, because as a kid, you interpret it in many different ways. Nobody cares about me, nobody loves me, which, I mean, it's a reasonable, but it's a reasonable response because it feels that way. And if it
Yeah.
feels that way, those feelings have to go somewhere.
Yeah,
Especially
exactly.
especially if they're ignored. Or like you say, if the tagline is because I said so,
That was it.
then you're dismissed as everything.
Yeah.
You're dismissed because I said so. What is that?
Yeah. Well, then you got to make up your own. Then you have to make up your own reasons, and they could be way off. But that's you got to have something to go with. And so if you're not given anything, you just kind of fill in the blanks.
Yes, and then that program becomes a deficit lack program.
Hmm. Hmm.
Not that like we were explaining, when just in how you explain this to kids, that there are lots of things that children can be sort of disappointed about and soothed about at the same time. I know you really
Yeah.
wanted to do that. I understand that I can see that's really hard for you. And then explain as though they mattered, as though they're
Hmm.
mattered, as though their expectations mattered, and certainly that the relationship between either the parent, the grandparent, caregiver, whatever, it has value. And so that the messaging that goes to the subconscious mind and runs as a program is, I can ask again. It's safe to ask.
Yes. Right. That's a good point. And you brought up one earlier when you said that it made you feel powerless. I think that's a really good point too, because that delayed gratification of getting something or anticipating something would or could leave you feeling a little bit powerless. But if you can grab it right now, then I think it would make you feel more powerful.
So that what you're kind of saying is that that tendency towards instant gratification is because you think you won't get it.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
think that makes a lot of sense. And it really, I really think that that's a lot of the work that we all have to do when we feel that we're not worthy of something, is because number one, we are. And number two, we then look at why do I have this belief that I'm not?
Hmm.
Because invariably you will find that message came from an external source. And especially in situations like we're describing, if somebody just says, well, I'm not talking to you about it, go out and play, or I don't want to talk about it, or because I said so, all these things,
Because yeah.
they're so dismissive, and they are so sort of establishing a kind of a power structure that is not helpful. I mean, everybody knows that children require discipline, and that we all require discipline at some level, but that it can be respectful and that it can be empowering.
Hmm.
And the empowering part is, I can't do that right now, but next month or next year or whatever it is, I can do it. And we can give that to you, or we can help you to do that. And then you build in this sense that I'm worthy of this thing I'm asking for. People are caring enough about it, and caring enough about me that we're gonna make it happen. What a different story.
Yes, and especially if in the end you actually receive it, and then that would really reaffirm that yes, if you wait, it will come. That would make the biggest difference.
And of course, you want to make sure that people avoid BSing, like say, well, we'll do that next week, but they don't have
Yeah.
to do it next week. And when you tell that to a child, they're waiting for next week and they're believing you.
Yes.
Or even an employer can do the same thing.
Yeah.
You could say to your employer, I want to discuss a possible position change, or I want to discuss a raise. And your employer says, well, we can't do that this year, next year, or next fiscal year or whatever. And next fiscal year comes along and you say, I'm recalling that you mentioned that we could talk about this then. Well, we'll leave that. No, next week, next year. And so,
Yeah.
it's a similar kind of thing where you can delay, you can let somebody know that there's a delay in the gratification, but don't lie about it.
Yeah.
Don't make something up because it's easier for you. Just say what it is, because, in our experience, and, we've been parents for lots of years, is that when you tell the truth about something, anybody can handle that.
That's right.
It's when you make up a story that gets your kids off your back or whatever, and that never happens, then you have really hurt someone.
Yes. Yeah. Because you're just trying to blow them off in the moment.
Yeah.
Because I mean, even if you don't have an answer, you can say that, because that's the truth. I don't know right now.
Yeah.
You could even say that instead of just blowing them off and not giving them anything. So I think that's really important, to tell the truth about it.
Yeah. And sometimes that's really difficult because, we don't want to, we don't like to disappoint our kids, our friends, our partners. And employers, for the most part, don't want to disappoint their employees, but they want them to stay. Or relationships are often like that, where you just want somebody to stay, but there's this one thing you don't want to give or concede to or whatever. And that if you're going to maintain your own integrity and the integrity of the person that you're talking to, even though the truth of it might be a little, let's say, difficult at times, challenging at times, scary at times, the in the long run, the messaging is so important. I care that this is an issue for you. I'm hearing what you're saying, and here's why I can't do this right now. And nobody has to agree with it. It doesn't have to be a full-on democratic agreement process. It just is the truth. It just is the truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wonder if, over time, if that also kind of rejigs the way the subconscious hears things and processes things, that disappointment is okay. Not getting what you want today is okay. Think of how different that is for people to have that kind of assuredness, to know that the next time this will be all right.
Huge.
Because I would say that I'm not going to go too far out on a limb, but I would say that a great portion of people who receive, early disappointments with either no or unloving or unsympathetic sort of packaging, carry that with them as a personal fault.
I would agree with that. Yeah. Yeah. I've kind of got a definition here of instant gratification or delayed, well, for both actually. Instant gratification is the desire to experience pleasure or fulfillment without delay or deferment. Basically, it's when you want it and you want it now. So that's instant. And delayed gratification is associated with resisting a smaller but more immediate reward in order to receive a larger or more enduring reward later.
Which would make sense, right? Because that's the ability and some ability and qualities that will assure you that if you do or don't, it doesn't mean you yourself are the deficit.
Mm-hmm.
Because you've now understood something about the way in which things come and don't come, and what you have to do and what you don't have to do, and it can be so led off the rails if your basic belief is, well, I don't deserve it.
Yeah, yeah.
Or I can't trust that this is going to be given to me. And so that kind of delayed gratification leads one to think that there's a process by which you get to that point.
Yeah. So do you feel like that is kind of like the basis, the foundation for like almost the rest of your life for that inner discipline?
Yeah, I think so. And I think so, because I think that number one, we don't carry some message about there's something wrong with us.
Yeah.
You take that personally because you can't understand exactly what happened. And then you also don't carry that tremendous burden of lack.
Right.
That if I'm going to get something, I've got to figure out a different way to get it, because that just I think we're just asking for it isn't going to do it. So different ways. And I think it also has something to do with with kind of addictions and the way we soothe ourselves when we're feeling that way, and that instant gratification is a way to do that. It's just
I would agree with that for sure.
Yeah, so I think there are a lot of things that that are easier for us when we have a solid view of ourselves as worth a conversation, worth some understanding, worth some compassion, worth some, loving care from a parent or a caregiver or whatever. And I think that makes all of the difference. And it doesn't even have to be both parents. It can be just one who you understand sees, or you think he sees you as someone who has some value. Because then all of those crazy messages that go just straight into the subconscious and start operating as programs in our lives are then working for us when that early sort of relationship of asking for things that you want can create a whole new experience for you.
Yeah, yeah. And the ripple effect of that, like in relationships and as your own parenting skills and all of that, it can really have a ripple effect for the rest of your life. Just that small little skill that you were or weren't taught or shown as a child, and the ripple effect that it can have for the rest of your life.
Yes, I agree. I think it's huge. And I really had a much kind of clearer understanding of that as I was reading more of that work that Bruce Lipton has done on on the work of the messaging early year messaging from 0 to age of 7 and sometimes a little older. And how those programs, unless we identify them, and we talked about this last time, unless we identify them and consciously change them, they just run the whole gamut of our born days.
Right.
Which is they just kind of mind-boggling. I was also kind of interested in, do you remember, we both worked at Self Connection Books for a number of years, so we read everything under the sun practically.
And still are.
And if we didn't read it, we at least bought it.
we at least bought it for later.
But I remember reading a book by I think he was a psychiatrist. His name was Daniel Goleman, and he wrote a book called Emotional Intelligence.
Right.
And, we've got a pretty clear understanding of how we just consider intelligence, because we're always tested for it, and what's your IQ and this, that, their thing, and what you have. But what he said is that emotional intelligence is as or more important than our IQ.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, our intelligent quotient. And it really covers a lot of the stuff that we're talking about. And he says, emotional intelligence can be described as the ability to perceive emotions, to access and generate emotions so as to assist thought, rather than, the other way around, which is where always our emotions are controlling our thoughts.
Right.
To understand emotions and emotional knowledge, and to reflectively regulate emotions so as to promote emotional and intellectual growth. And he goes on to say there are 5 major components to emotional intelligence. And the first one is self-awareness, and we're talking about this all the time, how you can only start when you have some awareness.
Yes.
And the second one is self-regulation, which is what we're talking about today, how that's it's number 2 on the factors for emotional intelligence, is that we have an ability to regulate what is going on internally, and which includes our belief systems too.
Right. Yeah.
3 is internal motivation. And this is kind of where you're motivated from inside, rather than, you got a motivational speaker and they said, if you get going on this and you tell yourself this 4 times a day, and you drink water that has a crystal in, you go and you're going to have a great day. And so you hear this, exaggerating, as you hear this and you go, okay, I gotta drink the water, okay, I gotta put a crystal in there, okay, I'm gonna tell myself 5 times a day, and then you're doing all these things that you heard about as an external motivation.
Okay.
But the key on that is if it's internally motivated, where you have a real feeling and a desire internally to do this thing, that the chances of your success, I think, are exponentially higher than if you receive motivation from the outside.
Oh, I totally agree with that.
And number 4 in emotional intelligence is empathy.
Oh.
And that's the ability, because in that field of emotional intelligence, if you have the ability to empathize with someone, to understand why they may be feeling a certain way or saying certain things, and you can kind of understand how that could be, your ability to have an intelligent, emotionally intelligent conversation with someone is much greater than if you think, well, that guy's nuts. I'm just going to tell him what I think. But you with empathy, you might say, I think he seems like he's had a pretty bad experience with something like that. I can understand what that might feel like. And then a whole different conversation. I mean, that's oversimplified, but then a whole different conversation arises, right?
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I wouldn't have thought of that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. And then the last one is social skills. And that's just, I think that's mostly having you're aware of what you're doing, what you're saying, how you're acting, and you treat people in a certain way, treat yourself in a certain way, go about your business in a certain way, that are intellectually and emotionally solid.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it kind of fits, it fits in I would recommend that book to anyone, just as a brilliant read. It's so well documented. It makes so much sense, and it brings so much information to the importance of who you are as a person. And how you can have so much control over the things that you can make a difference with, in terms of the way you treat yourself and the way you treat others. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Read. I'll mention that in the, I'll give the information of that book in the notes below the podcast.
Yeah, because I think he coined that, didn't he? Wasn't he the one that coined that phrase, emotional intelligence?
Yes, I think that I'm not sure he coined it, because I know he and the Dalai Lama had several conversations about this in terms of world peace and how it would impact world peace.
Oh, okay.
And so, because the Dalai Lama was always, always interested in people that were doing work that promoted peace, not
Right.
only within the individual, but within the larger community. And so I think they had quite a collaborative period of time when they talked about this for a number of years. And so I'm not sure if he coined it, but I wouldn't be surprised if he did.
Okay. So I mean, anything really can be learned. So if someone is struggling with wants to try to have a little bit more inner discipline or delayed gratification, and they really struggle with that, what do you think some of the things that they can do to,
Well, I think first of all, we always say number one, awareness.
Yeah.
In what area am I doing that?
Mm-hmm.
And then start to change the messaging. Number two, change the messaging, and then the practice. So if let's say you were somebody who couldn't walk by a peanut butter cookie because she loves her peanut butter cookies.
I had one yesterday.
But let's use you as an example, because I always find that, because you've always kind of got your next plan for your peanut butter cookie. So let's say that you decided that the peanut butter cookies were okay, but that maybe not so often. Let's say, which I know this isn't right, but let's say you had to have one every day.
Okay.
So you could say that I love peanut butter cookies, but I know that if I have them every day, that they're not good for my health.
Mm-hmm.
But I could have one once a week and practice that. So when the urge comes up, because you also have to manage the urge.
Yeah.
Urge comes up because it's going to say, are you kidding me? What? We have to wait till Wednesday? No, and I need this right now. And then you reinforce the messaging. And you could even talk to your subconscious mind, because I do that. I say, now, just a minute here. Don't get so excited, because we're going to delay this, but it'll be okay. And when we have that peanut butter cookie at the end of the week, it's going to taste really good.
You're right there, because when it finally does come, I mean, if you have it every single day, it kind of gets old. But if you wait for that once a week, it is so much more satisfying.
And those are the kind of message that you can tell yourself too, because it's a real thing. So that when the impulse comes up, no, I can't wait, because this is what people struggle with all the time with diets.
Yeah.
Comes up and it will never take you over. The impulse will only come up so far, and when it gets a little uncomfortable, we tend to act on it, but it only has that much energy. And sometimes where people act on an impulse is just where almost the top of that impulse is, but they don't think there's an end to it.
Right.
And so you acknowledge that, because in your mind and in your body, it's actually a real thing. So if you were to say, I'm just, get out of here. We don't want to get out of here. We don't want to talk about this, and kind of put yourself down or make yourself feel bad. You acknowledge it and you say, I understand that you want this now, but we have an agreement.
Yeah. Yeah.
And build that new skill around the peanut butter cookie of the delayed reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And then you find it's transferable.
How do you mean?
Transferable to something else that you think you
okay. So just, yeah. Okay. I'll do that.
Everything has a practice, but it always begins with an awareness.
That's true. I agree. Yeah.
And all of those things are very doable. And where we run into trouble is we listen to the messaging that says we can't wait.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Instead of a kind word to the messaging that says, I hear you, but not today.
You have to have that adult in the head.
Well, you also have to have the compassion, because if you show the same lack of compassion that you had been showed in the past, it's just going to promote further. I got to get this while I can.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that self-compassion is a really important piece, because you almost have to learn what it feels like.
Yeah, you're right. Because the feeling really is important, isn't it? Like that, like Daniel Goleman said, the emotional intelligence, the emotions behind it really make a difference.
Yeah. And then you want, and then I think as you go further down the path, you find that your thoughts don't even create that wild emotional kick, because you've now got some really good practice in dealing with that emotional sort of urgency.
Mm-hmm.
And it sort of has a slow burn to it, and eventually the flame goes out. That it doesn't take you over anymore. It doesn't even, you don't
Yeah.
even notice it.
Well, it was the first time. Actually, no, I lied. So I had one yesterday, and I'll admit that I actually had one the day before too. But it was the first time in months that I had totally actually kind of forgotten about them. And then when I had one the other day, it was so good. I had another one yesterday, but that's it. I'm good. I'm good now.
So, but just the awareness of that one, and that period of going right to the next day,
Right.
where I call it an intervention because it's a self-intervention, where you say to yourself, just a minute, Barb, let's slow down here. And that's where all the change happens. The awareness, you have a plan. It's internally motivated in some ways, because there is a need to change that sort of, whatever you might call it. I think it's a little bit of an addiction, but then whatever. I have both. and it's doable. And I think that if people are kinder to themselves and more sort of, I guess, thoughtful in the way they treat their own sort of foibles that they think that means there's something wrong with them.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with you. There's just a lot of learning and a lot of messaging that hasn't been helpful, and there's nothing wrong with you.
Right. Oh, I'm telling you, this stuff's tough, isn't it?
It's a job. It's a lifelong job. So anyway, let's skip to something new here. What have you been watching this week?
Well, I haven't really been watching anything new, and that's the problem. I haven't been able to find anything new. So I'm rewatching. I don't know if anybody has seen it, but it's a series on Netflix called Stranger Things.
Oh yes. Upside
So
down.
I'm actually rewatching it.
That's a good series, though. That's a fun series to watch. That series sprung a lot of careers for people. It was so well done.
Yeah. And I think I do believe there's another season coming. So keep my fingers crossed. It'll be different because these kids now will be, like grown teenagers. And so it'll be different, but it's really a fun show to watch. How about you?
I haven't started anything new. I just finished another Nordic noir series. But don't ask me the name of it. I can't remember right now.
Okay.
And I've been reading a lot recently. I've been inspired by our last podcast to read a lot. So I've been reading another Bruce Lipton book called The Honeymoon Effect, where he talks about why positive emotions can spring us into so many new areas of our lives.
Oh.
How we don't have to be on an actual honeymoon to have those emotions and those feelings, but we can create them in our own lives. And it's a really well done book, and I'm really enjoying it. And so I've just been doing a little more reading.
Speaking of reading, because we mentioned that book last week, I have realized, and I realized this before, but I guess I wasn't really as aware as I thought that I was. When I start to read, I fall asleep. And so that's why I don't do a lot of reading anymore. I used to read all the time, and I don't know why I don't anymore. And I just discovered, trying to read that book, that I get a few pages in, and
You're on.
I'm nodding off. Yeah,
Well,
it's weird.
Let's save that for next time.
Yeah, it'll take me a long time to read that book.
Okay, Barb. Well, it was lovely talking to you today,
You as well.
and we'll see you next week.
Okay, Pat.
Bye.
Goodbye, Pat.